The German shepherd's howls pierced through the pre-dawn silence of Millbrook Heights, like a siren announcing catastrophe. Thaddeus Blackwood had heard many sounds during his 37 years as a patrol officer, but nothing quite like the anguish emanating from the dog standing at his front door at 4:17 a.m. Zariana, magnificent beast with intelligent amber eyes, stood trembling in the rain, his leash dragging behind him like a broken chain. No sign of his owner, Seo Young Kong, anywhere, for 3 years. Thaddeus had watched the same ritual from his kitchen window while nursing his morning coffee. Every night at precisely 11:45 p.m., Seo Yoon would emerge from the Victorian house across the street with Zarian at her side. Rain or shine, snow or heat wave, the routine never varied. She'd walk the same route, down Maple Street, through Crescent Park, around the old cemetery, and back home by 12:30 a.m. Neighbors had grown accustomed to seeing her silhouette moving through the darkness, Zarian's protective presence flanking her steps. She was a creature of habit, methodical and predictable, which made this morning's anomaly all the more disturbing. Thaddeus pulled on his rain jacket and stepped onto the porch. Zarian immediately pressed against his legs, whimpering and pawing at the ground. The dog's coat was soaked through, but more troubling were the dark stains matting the fur around his collar, stains that looked suspiciously like blood. "Easy, boy," Thaddeus murmured, examining the leash. The metal clasp was intact, but the leather showed clear signs of being cut with a sharp blade. Someone had deliberately severed the connection between dog and owner. He'd known Seo Yun since she'd moved to the neighborhood 5 years ago, a software engineer who worked remotely and kept to herself. She'd emigrated from Seoul with dreams of American success, purchasing the old Henley house with Cassia, transaction that had raised eyebrows among longtime residents. But she'd proven herself a quiet, respectful neighbor who maintained her property immaculately and never caused trouble. The only peculiarity was her nocturnal walking schedule. When Thaddeus had once asked about it during a chance encounter at the mailbox, she'd simply said the night air helped her think, and needed the exercise. Something in her eyes had suggested there was more to the story, but he'd respected her privacy. Now, as he led Zarian back to his own house and reached for his phone to call the station, Thaddeus wondered what secrets Seo Yan might have been harboring. The dog's distress was palpable. This wasn't a case of a lost owner or a simple accident. Every instinct Thaddeus had developed over decades of police work was screaming that something terrible had happened. During last night's walk, Detective Jung-Hoon Chen arrived within 20 minutes, his sharp eyes immediately cataloging the scene. At 42, Chen had built a reputation for solving cases that others deemed impossible, partly due to his methodical approach and partly due to his ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. "The dog's been out here how long?" Chen asked, crouching to examine Zarian more closely. "Found him around for this morning, but given how soaked he is, I'd guess he's been wandering for hours," Thaddeus replied. "The blood on his collar isn't his," Chen finished, lifting the dog's chin to reveal an unmarked throat beneath the stained fur. "Someone else's blood. Question is, whose, and how did it get there?" Detective Chen's team cordoned off Seo Yan's house by 6 a.m., transforming the quiet residential street into a hive of investigative activity. Crime scene technicians photographed every detail, while Chen methodically worked through the Victorian home, searching for clues about what might have driven someone to target its owner. The house revealed a woman of precise habits and hidden depths. Seo Yan's home office contained 3 separate computer systems, each encrypted with military-grade security. Financial documents showed she'd been earning significantly more than her neighbors, assumed nearly $300,000 annually through various consulting contracts with technology firms across Asia and Europe. But it was the basement that yielded the first significant clue. Hidden behind a false wall, Chen discovered a climate-controlled room containing dozens of hard drives, burner phones, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. The setup was sophisticated, professional, the kind of operation that suggested SEO. Ian Kong might not have been the simple software engineer she'd claimed to be. Detective Chen, Officer Minjun Zarkonian called from upstairs. "You need to see this." Chen found the young officer in SEO's bedroom, holding a manila envelope that had been taped underneath her nightstand drawer. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing various people in compromising situations. Politicians, business executives, even what appeared to be foreign diplomats. Each photo was dated and labeled with cryptic codes. "Blackmail," Chen muttered, spreading the photographs across the bed. She wasn't just a software engineer. She was running some kind of intelligence operation. The deeper they dug, the more complex SEO's double life became. Phone records revealed encrypted communications with contacts in 12 different countries. Bank statements showed regular deposits from shell companies that forensic accountant Sarah Zircon would later trace to various intelligence agencies and private security firms. By noon, Chen had assembled a timeline of SEO's activities in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She'd been increasingly paranoid, installing new security cameras and changing her walking route slightly, though still maintaining the same general schedule that had made her predictable to anyone watching. The breakthrough came when team found SEO's emergency go bag hidden in her garage, $50,000 in various currencies, 3 different passports, and a handwritten note that chilled him to the bone. "If something happens to me, check the cemetery." The Blackwood plot. Trust no one in the department, except Chen. Thaddeus Blackwood felt his blood freeze when Chen shared the note's contents. His family plot in the old cemetery was exactly along SEO's nightly walking route. More disturbing was the implication that she'd somehow known she was in danger, and that she'd specifically trusted only Chen within the police department. She knew someone was coming for her, Chen realized. The question is whether she knew who. Meanwhile, Zarian remained at Thaddeus's house, refusing food and spending hours staring out the window toward the cemetery. The dog's behavior was becoming increasingly agitated, as if he was trying to communicate something crucial about that final night. Chen decided to walk SEO's exact route, hoping to understand what had happened. As darkness fell over Millbrook Heights, he set out with Zarian as his guide, following the same path that SEO had taken countless times before. The dog led him confidently through the familiar streets, past the park, and toward the cemetery gates. But as they approached the wrought iron entrance, Zarian suddenly stopped, his hackles rising as he stared into the darkness beyond. Something was wrong. Chen could feel it, a presence watching from the shadows, the same malevolent force that had likely confronted SEO during her final walk. He reached for his radio to call for backup, but the device crackled with static. His cell phone showed no signal. Someone had jammed the communications in this area, isolating him just as they'd likely isolated SEO-YEON. As Chen peered into the cemetery's depths, he began to understand that SEO's disappearance wasn't random. Someone had been planning this for weeks, studying her patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and now, they knew he was getting close to the truth. The Blackwood family plot sat in the cemetery's northeastern corner, a collection of weathered headstones dating back to the 1800s. Under the pale moonlight filtering through ancient oak branches, Detective Chen approached the area where Z had led him, every instinct screaming that he was walking into danger. The German shepherd's behavior had grown more erratic as they'd entered the cemetery grounds. Now, near the Blackwood plot, Zarian began digging frantically at a specific spot beside the oldest grave marker, that of Ezekiel Blackwood. Died 1847. Chen's flashlight beam revealed disturbed earth that hadn't been there during the day's initial crime scene sweep. Someone had been here recently, burying something in the hallowed ground. As Zarian continued digging, the beam caught something metallic glinting in the loose soil. COIN smartphone. its screen shattered, but potentially salvageable. Chen carefully bagged the evidence, but as he stood, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on gravel made him freeze. Someone else was in the cemetery, moving deliberately toward his position. He reached for his weapon, then remembered his radio was still dead. Whoever was jamming, communications was close. Detective Chen, a familiar voice called out from the darkness. Step away from the grave. Captain Aldrich Vex emerged from behind, a towering monument, his service weapon drawn. At 58, Vex had been Chun's mentor for over a decade, the man who'd taught him everything about investigative work. Seeing him here, armed and threatening, sent ice through Chun's veins. Captain, what are you doing here? Cleaning up a mess that should have been handled weeks ago. Vex replied, his voice carrying a coldness Chen had never heard before. Coin Kong was getting too close to something she should have left alone. The pieces began falling into place in Chen's mind. Vex had access to all police communications, knew about every aspect of the investigation. He could have easily monitored Coin's activities, learned her routines, planned a perfect ambush. She discovered something about you, Chen said, keeping his voice steady while calculating distances and angles. Zarian had stopped digging and was now growling low in his throat, sensing the threat. She discovered something about all of us, Vex corrected. A network that's been operating for 20 years, moving money and information through channels that certain people prefer to keep quiet. COIN was supposed to be a simple asset, helping us access overseas financial systems. Instead, she started digging into our operations, taking photographs, gathering evidence. Chen remembered the blackmail photos they'd found in Coin's house. She hadn't been running her own operations. She'd been documenting a corruption ring within the police department itself. Where is she? Captain Vex's smile was cold. That depends on how cooperative you plan to be, Detective. This can end simply you. Forget what you've found, transfer to another department, and everyone goes home safe. Or it can end badly. Before Chen could respond, Zarian launched himself at Vex with a snarl of pure rage. The dog's attack was swift and vicious, 40 pounds of muscle and fury driven by loyalty to his missing owner. Vex's shot went wide as he stumbled backward, giving Chen the opening he needed. The struggle was brief but violent. Vex had experience and desperation on his side, but Chen had youth and the burning need to find Coin alive. When the dust settled, Vex was unconscious and zip-tied with Chen's emergency restraints, and Zarian was standing guard over the fallen captain like a sentinel. Chen's first call went to Detective Sarah Blackwood, Thaddeus's daughter, and one of the few officers he was certain couldn't be involved in Vex's corruption ring. She arrived within minutes with a full tactical team and federal agents, who'd apparently been investigating the same network from a different angle. We've been tracking financial irregularities in the department for months, Agent Kamiko Zex explained as they secured the scene. Your Captain Vex was just one node in a much larger web. Coin Kong had somehow infiltrated their operation and was feeding information to federal investigators. So she was undercover FBI. Freelance, Agent Zex corrected. A white-hat hacker who stumbled onto their network while doing legitimate security consulting. Instead of walking away, she decided to help us gather evidence. That decision likely saved her life, and yours. As they processed the scene, Zarian led them to another disturbed area, near the cemetery's maintenance shed. This time, the digging revealed not evidence, but Coin herself unconscious, but alive, bound and hidden in an underground storage compartment that had been prepared days in advance. She was dehydrated and traumatized, but breathing. 3 days after Coin's rescue, the Millbrook Heights Police Department was in chaos. Captain Vex's arrest had triggered a federal investigation that reached into every corner of the force, revealing a corruption network that stretched across multiple jurisdictions and involved millions in illegal transactions. SEO-YEON sat in a secure federal facility, slowly recovering her strength while providing detailed testimony about the intelligence she'd gathered. Her undercover work had been more extensive than anyone had initially realized. She'd spent 2 years methodically documenting financial crimes, human trafficking connections, and political bribes that implicated dozens of officials. Detective Chen found himself at the center of the federal task force, his reputation for integrity making him invaluable as investigators worked to separate clean officers from corrupted ones. The scope of what they'd uncovered was staggering. The network was using police resources to facilitate drug trafficking from Southeast Asia. Agent Zex explained during a briefing. Captain Vex and at least 12 other officers were providing security for shipments, manipulating evidence, and eliminating witnesses. COIN's computer skills gave her access to their communications, but when they realized she was documenting everything, they decided she had to die. Chen finished. But why not just kill her immediately? Why? The elaborate cemetery setup. The answer came from SCOIN herself, during her first extensive interview. Despite her ordeal, her mind remained sharp, her voice steady, as she recounted the final night. Vex needed my encryption keys, she explained, her fingers absently stroking Syrian's head. The dog hadn't left her side since the rescue. The evidence I'd gathered was stored in multiple secure servers, protected by multi-factor authentication. He couldn't just delete it. He needed me alive long enough to access everything and destroy it. She'd been walking Zarian that night when 3 men had ambushed her near the cemetery gates. They'd used a tranquilizer dart, likely something stolen from animal control, to incapacitate her quickly. But Zarian had fought back viciously, and in the struggle, someone had been badly injured. The blood on his collar came from Officer Demetrius Kane, she continued. Zarian nearly tore his throat out when they tried to take me. That's why they cut the leash and let him run. They needed immediate medical attention for Kane, officer. Kane was now in federal custody, his throat bearing distinctive dog bite scars that matched Zarian's dental impressions perfectly. His confession had opened new avenues of investigation, revealing connections to organized crime families in 3 states. But the most shocking revelation came when federal accountants traced the money flows. The corruption network had been funneling profits through a complex web of shell companies, ultimately funding terrorist organizations overseas. What had started as simple police corruption had evolved into a national security threat. We estimate they moved over $50 million in the past 3 years, Agent Zex reported. Drug money, human trafficking proceeds, weapons sales, all of it, filtered through seemingly legitimate businesses, and then transferred to hostile foreign agents. Detective Sarah Blackwood, Thaddeus's daughter, had emerged as one of the heroes of the investigation. Her forensic accounting skills had helped trace the financial connections that implicated the broader network. But even she was stunned by the scope of what they'd uncovered. My own father had been unknowingly watching their operation for years, she told Chen during a brief break in their marathon investigation sessions. COO Yan chose her walking route specifically because it passed his house. She knew that if anything happened to her, Dad would notice and investigate. The federal raids that followed Vex's arrest were surgical and devastating. Homes were searched, bank accounts frozen, and digital evidence seized from dozens of locations. The corruption network that had operated with impunity for years crumbled within 72 hours. But as the investigation deepened, Chen realized they'd only scratched the surface. Phone records recovered from Vex's personal devices revealed communications with contacts in Washington, D.C., suggesting the network had connections at the federal level as well. The case that had started with a missing woman and a distressed dog was evolving into something that could reshape law enforcement across multiple states. And at the center of it all was SEO Yankunga, brilliant woman who'd risked everything to expose the truth. As Chen prepared for another day of interviews and evidence review, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial. Vex had been too confident during his arrest, too willing to surrender. It was as if he knew something the federal agents didn't, something that suggested the network might have one more card to play. Agent Kimiko's ex's secure phone buzzed at 3 a.m., with the kind of call that every federal investigator dreads. The voice on the other end belonged to Deputy Director Marcus Thorne from FBI headquarters. And his words chilled her blood. "We have a problem. Someone just accessed SEOIN Kong's encrypted servers from inside the federal building." Chen arrived at the secure facility within 20 minutes to find chaos. 3 agents were dead, killed with professional efficiency, and SEO was missing again. But this time Zarian was gone, too, and there was no sign of struggle in her room. She went willingly, Agent Sex realized, studying the scene. No broken restraints, no signs of resistance. Someone she trusted convinced her to leave. The security footage told a disturbing story. At 2:47 a.m., a figure in federal agent clothing had entered SEOIN's room using proper credentials and biometric access. The cameras showed a brief conversation, then SEOIN gathering her belongings and walking out with Zarian at her side. But when they enhanced the footage, Chun's blood ran cold. The federal agent was Detective Sarah Blackwood, Thaddeus's daughter, the woman they'd trusted to help unravel the corruption network. "She's been playing us from the beginning," Chen realized. The network didn't just have Captain Vex. They had someone positioned to monitor the investigation. Someone who could direct us toward the evidence they wanted us to find while protecting their real operations. The truth was more complex and devastating than anyone had imagined. Sarah Blackwood hadn't just been corrupted by the network, she'd been one of its founders. Her forensic accounting skills hadn't been used to trace criminal money flows. She'd been the architect who'd designed those flows in the first place. "She's been planning this for years," Agent Sex said as they raced through the early morning darkness toward the Blackwood family home, positioning herself as the hero investigator while actually controlling what we discovered. Every lead we followed, every connection we made, she guided us there. But when they arrived at Thaddeus Blackwood's house, they found the veteran officer tied up in his basement, barely conscious and bearing signs of being drugged. Sarah had used her own father as an unwitting pawn, knowing that his reputation for integrity would lend credibility to whatever story she chose to tell. She took them to the cemetery. Thaddeus mumbled as paramedics checked his vitals. Said something about finishing what Vex couldn't, the real servers. Not in the house, underground, Chun's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. The basement room they'd found in SEOIN's house had been a decoy, containing just enough evidence to seem significant while hiding the location of her real data storage. The cemetery hadn't been chosen randomly as a burial site for evidence. It was where SEOIN had actually hidden her servers, in underground chambers that connected to the old storm drain system. She's going to force SEOIN to access the real evidence and destroy it, Chen realized. Everything we've uncovered so far has been carefully curated to eliminate the network's lower-level members while protecting the core leadership. The race to the cemetery became a desperate attempt to save not just SEOIN's life, but the integrity of an investigation that had already consumed dozens of careers and revealed corruption at levels no one had imagined. As they approached the retiring gates, Chen's radio crackled with an encrypted transmission that chilled him. "Detective Chen, this is Sarah. If you want to see SEOIN and her dog alive, come alone to the Blackwood plot. You have 10 minutes. Agent Sex grabbed his arm as he started toward the cemetery entrance. "It's a trap. She'll kill you the moment you get close." "Maybe," Chen replied, checking his weapon and adjusting his body armor. "But she needs SEO alive to access those servers, and she needs me to believe this can end peacefully. That gives us an advantage." As Chen walked into the darkness of the cemetery, he activated a hidden transmitter that would broadcast everything to the federal tactical team positioning around the perimeter. Whatever Sarah Blackwood had planned, it would be recorded and witnessed. The corruption network's final gambit was about to play out among the graves of Millbrook Heights' founding families, with the fate of a brilliant hacker and her loyal dog hanging in the balance. Detective Chen found them at the center of the Blackwood family plot, illuminated by battery-powered work lights that cast harsh shadows across the weathered headstones. Xiao knelt beside an open grave, her hands working at a ruggedized laptop, connected to cables that disappeared into the earth below. Zarian lay motionless nearby, a tranquilizer dart protruding from his flank. Detective Sarah Blackwood stood behind Xiao with a gun pressed to the back of her head, her face a mask of cold calculation that Chen had never seen before. The woman he'd worked alongside for 3 years, respected as a colleague, had become something alien and dangerous. "You're just in time to watch the end of this investigation," Sarah said, without looking up from Chen. "Xiao is about to accidentally trigger a data purge that will destroy all the evidence she's gathered." "Tragic technical error? Really? How long have you been planning this?" Chen asked, keeping his voice steady while calculating angles and distances. The tactical team would be in position, but Sarah's finger was already on the trigger. "Since before Xiao moved to the neighborhood," Sarah replied. "We knew federal investigators were sniffing around our operations. We needed someone inside their information gathering, someone who could feed us intelligence about what they knew. Xiao was supposed to be a simple asset, use her computer skills for our benefit, then dispose of her when she became unnecessary." His voice was barely a whisper, but Chen could hear the steel beneath her exhaustion. "She doesn't know about the dead man's switch." Sarah's gun pressed harder against Xiao's skull. "What switch?" "The failsafe I built into every server," Xiao continued, her fingers still working at the keyboard. "If I don't check in with specific contacts every 12 hours, or if someone tries to force me to destroy the data, everything automatically uploads to journalists and federal investigators worldwide. You've already triggered it by threatening me." Chen watched Sarah's face transform as she realized the trap. Xiao hadn't been stalling or cooperating, she'd been running out the clock on a system designed to ensure the truth would survive, even if she didn't. "You're bluffing," Sarah snarled, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Check your secure phone," Xiao suggested calmly. "The upload started 20 minutes ago. Financial records, communication, intercepts, photographs, video surveillance. From your own house, everything I've gathered over the past 2 years is now in the hands of every major news organization and federal agency." Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her phone, and in that moment of distraction, Chen moved. His tackle was perfect, driving Sarah away from Xiao and into the side of a granite monument. The gun discharged harmlessly into the air as they went down together, grappling in the dirt between centuries-old graves. The fight was brief, but vicious. Sarah had desperation and the knowledge that her life was over regardless of the outcome, but Chen had righteous fury and the backup of federal agents who emerged from the darkness like avenging spirits. When the dust settled, Sarah Blackwood was unconscious and zip-tied, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead where she'd struck the monument. Xiao was cradling Zirian's head as the tranquilizer slowly wore off, and Chen was calling for medical support while processing the magnitude of what they'd prevented. "The dead man's switch, was that real?" he asked Xiao as paramedics checked her vitals. Her tired smile was the first genuine expression he'd seen from her in days. "Every word. I've been feeding information to investigative journalists for months, building multiple redundant systems to ensure the truth would survive even if I didn't. Sarah's network is finished." Over the following weeks, the data Xiao had gathered proved to be even more damaging than anyone had anticipated. The corruption network had connections reaching into 12 states and 3 federal agencies. Over 200 arrests were made, including politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials who'd been facilitating criminal operations for decades. "Captain," Vex received a life sentence without parole for his role in organizing the network. Sarah Blackwood was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death, a penalty she would never serve, taking her own life in federal custody before the appeals process could begin. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 6 months later, when Seo Ian Kong received the FBI Director's Award for Exceptional Service during a ceremony at the federal building. She'd recovered fully from her ordeal and had accepted a position as a cybersecurity consultant for federal law enforcement. Now sporting an official therapy dog vest, sat perfectly still beside her chair as Director Thorne presented the award. The German Shepherd had become something of a legend among federal agents. The dog whose loyalty and courage had helped expose one of the largest corruption networks in American law enforcement history. Detective Chen, now promoted to lead a new multi-jurisdictional task force focused on police corruption, watched from the audience as Seo Ian accepted recognition for her incredible bravery. Thaddeus Blackwood sat beside him, still processing the betrayal by his own daughter, but proud of the role he'd inadvertently played in bringing justice. After the ceremony, as they walked out into the Washington, D.C. sunshine, Seo Ian turned to Chen with a question that had been bothering her. "How did you know Sarah was lying about the uploads?" Chen smiled. "I didn't. But I knew you well enough by then to trust that you'd have planned for every contingency. Someone smart enough to infiltrate a criminal network and gather evidence for 2 years without being detected wouldn't go into that cemetery without multiple backup plans." Zarian barked once, as if agreeing with the assessment, then trotted ahead toward the parking garage where their new lives awaited. The nightmare of Millbrook Heights was behind them, but the work of rebuilding trust in law enforcement would continue for years to come. Sometimes justice comes, not from the actions of institutions, but from the courage of individuals willing to walk into danger, whether they have 2 legs or 4, to ensure that truth survives in the darkness.